Alright. Judge requires parents to turn over transgender children's medical records by Savannah Tynes Fernandez. Okay, parents who are fighting to overturn Alabama's ban on some of types of gender affirming care have been ordered by the federal judge to turn over their children's medical records. Boe versus Marshall was brought by 5 parents who argue a 2022 state law strips them of right to make important decisions about their children's health care. All of the children involved in the case are transgender, according to court documents, though not all have been formally diagnosed with gender dysphoria or chosen to take medication. The Vulnerable Child Compassion and Protection Act (SB 184) bans puberty blockers, hormone therapy, and gender affirming surgeries for minors. Minors are not getting surgeries for the most part, like, if at all. So, this is just kind of an odd language here. Um, the law punishes not only doctors, but also, quote, any other individuals who prescribes or administers the treatment for any with a felony conviction up to 10 years in jail. Puberty blockers and hormone therapy are considered safe and effective, quote, evidence-based care for children and adults in appropriate situations, according to the American Academy of Pediatrics. Gender affirming surgeries for minors were not performed in Alabama prior to the passage of the law. Okay, thank you. Last year, a strict judge temporarily blocked parts of the law from going into effect, namely the ban on puberty blockers and the felony conviction. State officials appealed that decision up to the 11th Circuit of Appeals. During the appeal process, defendants, including Alabama Attorney General Steve Marshall, have asked for medical and mental health records that relate to treatment for gender dysphoria, including documents, notes, and forms. U.S. District Judge Lilies Burke ruled Monday that the records are relevant to the case since the plaintiffs had argued that the treatments their children receive are medically necessary. Quote, the parent plaintiffs claim that any disruption in their children's care, whether it is the care they are currently receiving or the care they intend to seek in the future, would have devastating effects on their mental health, possibly including self-harm and suicide, wrote Burke in the ruling, and goes on to say, ultimately, the plaintiffs have the burden to prove the allegations in their complaint. His ruling concluded that because the plaintiffs have centered their case on the arguments that injury and emotional distress would be caused by a lack of treatment, psychotherapist patient privilege has been effectively waived. The judge noted one parent's testimony that, quote, if April had to go through male puberty, then that she would attempt to harm herself and her mental health would decline. These people obviously don't care. Alright. In the response, in the defendant's initial request for medical records, plaintiffs stated that such records are protected and confidential medical information. They also argued that under the new law, evidence that such treatment have been offered in the state could possibly lead to criminal charges. After 20 medical organizations have filed briefs in support of the plaintiff's claims that the treatments are essentially medical, including the American Academy of Pediatrics and the American Academy of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry, Burke noted that all records that are turned over must be confidential. Both parties entered into a protective order in July that restricts use and access to any children's personal health information. If you purchase a product or register for any account through one of the links on our site, we may okay. Well, that was a short article, but in comparison to the timeline, it's just important to read. I'm still very far behind. Alright, time for some positive news, I guess. Vaguely positive. Alright. So, there's this poll based on the Kentucky laws that are stripping gender affirming care for people. But just like the anti abortion politicians making decisions for red state women, um, the irony is that the red state women wanted the abortions more than the red state politicians making these choices for their bodies. So there's hope. Just because they're red staters doesn't mean that these minorities and individuals don't exist. Alright. Poll. Majority of Kentuckians oppose proposed law on gender-affirming healthcare. Kentucky. A majority of Kentucky voters would oppose a proposed law that would allow the state to overrule parents' decisions to get health care for their transgender teenager, according to new poll conducted by Mason-Dixon Polling and Strategy, released Thursday, February 23rd. Wow. What you need to know. Of Kentuckians, 71% say they would oppose a proposed state law that would allow the state to overrule parents' decisions to obtain health care for their transgender teenager, the poll finds. Of Democrats, 83 and 62% of Republicans say they oppose to such a law. Whoa. 83 Democrats? What? Okay. The trend transcends regional differences, with the majority in urban and rural areas of the state saying they would oppose such a law. The polling comes as the Republican-led legislature has filed a number of bills aimed at transgender Kentuckians. The poll was conducted from January 18th through January 23rd, 2023, and randomly surveyed Kentucky voters by landline and cell phone numbers, and randomly surveyed over 625 registered voters in Kentucky by landline and cell phone. The poll asked them the following question, quote, would you support or oppose a proposed Kentucky law that would allow the state to overrule parents' decision to obtain certain health care for their transgender teenagers, such as the certain medications that can regulate the onset of puberty? Alright. Of Kentucky voters surveyed, 71 say they would oppose such a law, with 21% saying they would support it and 8% saying they are undecided, the poll finds. The polling data revealed that the trend transcends regional differences, partly party affiliation and gender identity. In Louisville, 80% of voters say they would oppose such a law, along with 79% of Central Kentuckians and 65% of Northern Kentuckians. According to the poll, in more rural parts of the state, 64% of voters in Eastern Kentucky and 66% of voters in Western Kentucky say they would oppose such a law, the poll finds. A majority of Republican, Democratic, and Independent voters are also in opposition. Of Democrats, 83% are opposed, with 14% in support and 3% undecided. According to the poll, 62% of Republicans are opposed, with 26% in support and 12% undecided. The poll finds. With independent voters, 67 say they are opposed, with 20% in support and 13% undecided. In a breakdown by gender, the poll finds 66% of males and 75% of females would oppose such a law. Alright. Just looking at this stat. Don't mind me. Alright. Kentuckians were asked if they would support or oppose a law that would allow their state to overrule a parent's decision. Okay, I just read this, but I'm just seeing it in a different style, obviously. Alright. Okay. The polling comes as the Republican led legislator in the session and has filed several bills related to transgender Kentuckians. Representative Senator Decker R. Waddy introduced House Bill 470. The bill would penalize healthcare providers and provide gender transition services to people under 18 years old. It was fast tracked to the committee the day it was introduced and has 35 sponsors. The bill proposed the bill proposes that the provision of transition services, quote, to a person under the age of 18 by medical or mental health providers unethical and unprofessional conduct. It would also strip providers of their license and hold them liable for damages and costs. While HB 470 covers a broad sweep of providers and organizations, including schools, insurance providers, and health and Medicare, it does not mention what the bill would do regarding parents who seek that care, whether in Kentucky or in another state. The margin of error for the poll is plus or minus 4% points. Whoa. Okay. So, eventually, guys, in this saga, I'm going to be covering Aaron Reed on Substack. I, I believe you should as well if you're still reading this now. Okay. Oh, okay. Oh, this is good. Again, few and far in between with this positive news. Alright. Transgender healthcare is now protected in Massachusetts. Minnesota Governor Tim Walz signed an executive order protecting and supporting access to gender affirming healthcare for LGBTQ people in the state on Wednesday. The move comes amid Republican backed efforts across the country to limit transgender healthcare for minors and young adults, sorry. Quote, Minnesota strives to be a welcoming and supportive place for LGBTQA plus minority members, the executive order read. It goes on to say, quote, we upheld the essential values of one Minnesota when all people, including members of the LGBTQIA plus community, are safe, celebrated, and able to live lives full of dignity and joy. And hopefully they won't have to, like, constantly be us versus them, that they're trans and they can just be normal people. You know, they're probably sick of having their identities brought up, and they're probably sick of mentioning it constantly. But this is just has nothing to do with the victims bringing it up. So anyone who knows this already is just probably rolling their eyes and saying, yeah, what else is new? Okay. Walz called gender affirming care a, quote, deeply personal decision for transgender patients and their families. Numerous medical organizations, including the American Medical Association and American Academy of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, have said that access to gender affirming care is an essential to health and wellness of gender diverse people. Studies have shown that gender affirming care can be life saving for transgender and non binary children and adolescents, promoting positive mental and physical health and well being. States like Tennessee, Arizona, Utah, Arkansas, Alabama, Mississippi, South Dakota, and Florida have passed policies or laws restricting transgender healthcare. Supporters of these laws believe that gender transition is harmful to youth and young adults. Some say patients should wait until they are older to make this kind of health decision. Um, yeah, I would say so if this wasn't so, like, they don't even care about the health. They're making this up about caring about children as usual. Um, Obviously, there's people confused, like that single digit individuals who are undecided on the matter. So I guess it's understandable, but all in all, this is a total crackdown that is slowly happening. This is not just about kids, this is about adults as well. So, anyways, in Minnesota, several legislative protections for LGBTQ people are in front of lawmakers, including banning conversion therapy and establishing Minnesota as, quote, a trans refugee state. More than 388 anti LGBTQ bills have been introduced in 23 alone, according to the ACLU. And as we will see eventually, it is actually over 400. So, again, you can see how late I am to this horrible nonsense. Alright. So, Center for Reproductive Rights just about Minnesota again. Alright. Now that the Supreme Court has overturned Roe, oh, this is about abortion, by the way. I'm kind of trying to go back to talking about cis women and go back and forth to the trans situation because these are overlapping dominoes that are slowly being overturned by the dominant hierarchies at hand. Okay. Now that the Supreme Court has overturned Roe, abortion will remain legal in Minnesota. The state's highest court has recognized the right to abortion under the Minnesota Constitution, and in 2023, the state created a statutory right to reproductive freedom. Restrictions. Minnesota law generally prohibits abortion after viability, but this statute was held unconstitutional. State law requires pregnant people who seek abortion care to undergo mandatory 24